This time on the Jason of All Trades channel, we are going to make this custom office desk for under $200. Let's get to it. After figuring out the basic design of the desk, I went ahead and cut my plywood in half. So all it is 3/4 of an inch, white pine plywood, nothing crazy, relatively inexpensive, but thick enough to do the job. So I went ahead and cut that down in half. I definitely could have gone deeper, but I don't think that having a bunch more depth on this desk is going to do me a lot of good, since it's primarily for running the computer. And what I've been doing is just moving these pieces around and figuring out about how much space I want to have. And then what I'm going to do after I figure out where everything needs to sit, I'm going to take these measurements, go into the office, and make sure that it's going to work in there. Okay, so I've got one end already cleaned up. I put a fresh edge on it. I never like to use factory edges on more fine woodworking if I can help it. So I'm going to show you how to put a nice clean edge on it. Obviously for something like this, my rule of thumb is anything over a foot. If you have a track saw, that's the time to use it. If you've already got one, that's the way to go. If you don't have a track saw, I'm going to show you a way that you can get around that. So just using a speed square and a flat edge. This is a nice easy way to get a square mark all the way from one side of the sheet to another. So I'm going to line my speed square up where it needs to be. Just like that. And now I'm just going to push this level up against that speed square. Stretch it out from end to end. Put some pressure down, remove my square. And get it marked out. It is a brand new day here, and the more astute of you might have noticed, I've actually got a new microphone set up. So I'm actually running a wireless mic now to a lapel mic. So hopefully I sound a little bit more even than I have in the past videos and from the last couple clips. So like I said, brand new day. So we have got this all mocked up. I like to use something underneath my workstation, especially when I'm building something like this. So I've got some old MDF that I've got laid underneath this thing in a general shape, so I can lay this on top here, making sure obviously that it's the same size. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to start cutting out my trim pieces to go along the edge of this thing. Because this is just regular plywood, we're going to have an edge on there that's going to look something like this, which although isn't the worst thing in the world, it's not ideal for what we want. So what we're going to do is I've got some 1 by 1.5, 1x2 that we're going to go ahead and kind of skirt this whole thing out with. So that is how the edge is going to be made up. It's something I've done in the past. It looks really sharp, and the best thing is anybody can do this with really minimal tooling. This is the back side of the board as a reminder. What I want to do is I want to put pocket screws in here to help keep this A, from rocking away, and B, to help keep them at the same level. For those of you who have never used a Kreg jig or a pocket jig before, I'm going to show you how to use this. So I'm going to line this up. There's convenient little marks. This isn't necessarily the intended use for this whole bracket. Get that in a little bit better light for you. But it'll work for what we're doing. So there's a little indicator here that tells us where we need to go. There's a little gauge on each side, or on this side, that tells you what your material thickness is. And there's also one here. I don't know if it'll focus in and show you that, but you can definitely see that one. So you set your material thickness on your drill bit as well as your guide. You chuck up your drill bit, and then you just run it down that guide. Just like that. We open up the vise, and now we've got our pocket for our pocket screw to go in. So So we're just gonna repeat this process all the way down and then get these two put together. Okay, so I've got all of this clamped down. A good rule of thumb with clamps, once you think you've got enough, add 3 more and then you might have enough. So, with all of your pocket screws, they're gonna come with a little guide either in the box or online. It's important that you use the right length of screw, otherwise you're gonna shoot this thing out the top of your project and you don't want that. So we're gonna get rid of the drill bit, we're gonna put in the square driver, which is the most inconvenient type of driver if you ask me. And all we're gonna do is just start pushing this thing together. Okay, so I've got all these holes cut. So there was a lot of holes. Looking at it now, every 4 inches was probably a little bit overkill, but it'll be fine. So we're gonna go ahead, call it a night, cut some boards tomorrow. And just like that, it's another new day, another new shirt, and yet again, another new audio solution. So yesterday's wireless microphone attempt didn't seem to pan out. I think I'm just in too close of recorders for it to work very well. So we're gonna set that on the back burner for now. I've got a new, different microphone attached to the camera, an external mic that's just a directional mic. Hopefully that works better. But with all that aside, let's talk about the project at hand. So I went through and I just made myself a little drawing of the project with all of the actual measurements from the project. So I've got our miter saw here. We're gonna go ahead and start cutting all the trim. And the other thing that the picture helps you do is make sure you've got all your miters going the right way. So we're gonna get those cut and then we'll start attaching them. Okay, I want to show you one thing on this. So I'm about ready to close the loop and I'm ever so slightly too long. So I'm going to take this back over to the miter saw and show you a little trick to fix that. Here at the miter saw, so if you just want to shave the smallest amount off of a piece, what you can do is put your blade all the way down, gently rest your piece up against kind of the frame of the blade, and then cut down. Because those teeth sit slightly outside of the frame, it's going to shave just a little bit off, so this should fit perfect in our piece now. And 80 screws later, we have all of our trim pieces on. Looking at it now, I'm really happy with how it's looking. One thing that you might consider doing if you're following along and want to do something similar, you could have this trim poking out the top, and it would actually look really cool if you were wanting to experiment or play around with an epoxy table. You could go and put rocks or pebbles or whatever knickknacks you wanted down in the table and then do some sort of clear epoxy on top. I think that would look really cool, but not the aesthetic that we're going for on this project. So now that we have these all in, the next step is figuring out how to build legs. And just like magic, we have all of our parts cut. So what I've got in terms of material is 2 inch by 2 inch and 1.5 by 1.5 inch square tubing. They're both 1/8 of an inch thick because my steel supply didn't have 14 gauge. I would have liked to have that weight savings, but 1/8 will be just fine. So we're gonna go ahead, now that I've got these all kind of laid out where they need to be, I've marked out where all of my seams are gonna be. I'm gonna go through with a flap disc and grind out those spots because I am gonna TIG weld this, and we're gonna get into the reason for that later on. But because we're going to TIG weld it, we need it down to bright, shiny metal. So I went ahead, marked it out with soapstone where all that's going to happen. So we're going to get that ground down, and then we can start welding. So I'm going to be doing scratch start TIG again. So those of you who've seen my custom welding cart video, if you haven't, please check that out. It'll be in the description below. I'm going to be using scratch start TIG again, but this time I'm going to be using some stainless filler rod. And that's gonna go to the effect that we wanna have with this desk. So the legs are actually not gonna get painted. What we're gonna do with these is we're gonna let these rust and then clear coat over them. But I want the welds to stay nice and shiny. So we're gonna be using some stainless filler rod and TIG welding, so that way the steel will rust, but the welds will not. It should give it a really nice effect. So we're gonna go ahead and start tacking this thing up. And then once we have it all tacked up, we'll get everything tacked together and then weld it out fully. Okay, so we have been busy off screen. I went ahead, I welded in our cross members here. I've also got my 3 holes drilled, and I've got these 2 sides bolted together. They're just 3/8 bolts. The only other thing I'm going to do to help bring these 2 sides together, since this one doesn't have a leg, I'm gonna put just a 1-inch tab underneath both sides. Not so much for stability and strength, but more for just convenience when I'm trying to put the 2 halves together. Just something to rest down on if I'm trying to put the table together by myself. Before we can put these 2 halves together, I need to make some places to mount the top to this. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've marked out where I want to drill holes through this thing. So I'm gonna drill a 1/4-inch hole all the way through the frame. Then I'm gonna go back through on the bottom side of this, and I'm gonna step bit it out. So that way it'll be big enough to fit the socket through. That should give it a really nice clean view from any angle. So you don't have big mounting plates anywhere like that. It'll also allow it just to sit a little bit more flush. So we're gonna go ahead and get all that done. The only other thing that I did off screen, let me go grab those, is I've got our feet mounted. So these are, our legs are 2-inch by 2-inch. These feet are 2.5-inch squares with rounded edges. And I just went ahead and I welded on a nut to the back side, so that way it'll fit up in the frame like that. So if I ever do want to put adjustable legs or anything else like that on it, I've got that in there. I don't think I'm going to need those right off the bat, but they're there if I ever need them. Okay, let's talk real briefly about how we're going to attach the top and the bottom. Now, here I've got an example piece of our wood, and what I've decided to go for is threaded inserts. So these have really coarse threading on the outside, and then they're 1/4 by 20 on the inside. You can get these in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and unfortunately, the only ones I was able to find on Amazon are a little too tall for my comfort level. So you can see how close we are to popping through the top of these this board. So once it's flush mounted, that's going to be really, really narrow. So what I've decided to do is go ahead and cut them down. So they'll stick up about halfway. This is a really simple process. What I did is I actually took a piece of my wood and I chipped off the top 3 layers of ply, got it down here to this level, pre-drilled a hole, threaded these through, and then just use the angle grinder and cut off disc to cut those flat. So what we're gonna do next is go through and drill our holes. So on the back side of this board, you can see I've got a bunch of test holes here. And the other thing that you need to make sure you have is a stop. If you're just putting a piece of tape on here, that's not going to actually stop you from going too far. If you hit a hollow spot, or if you get through a knot or something like that, you're going to poke through the top of your board, as I've done here. We don't want to do that. So what you can do is just take a piece of 2x4 or 2x2, or really any piece of scrap wood that you've got lying around your shop. Just do some measuring and drill straight through it. And now you've got a positive stop. So our drill cannot physically go past that point at which we cut our threads off. So it's going to give us a really nice distance through there. So that should work great. So we're going to go ahead, go drill all our holes. Since I've cut the kind of self-starting point off of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and take one of these full ones, go through and get all the holes started kind of with that more coarse thread, and then I'll follow it back up with the ones that I've cut. with all of our sanding done, and now it's time to get into finishing this top. Now, one of my favorite ways to finish tops is by burning them. Now, I don't suggest this if you have like something like a really nice maple or an oak top, but when you're building something with budget materials, burning it actually gives it a really nice look to make it look much nicer than it actually is. Not to say that this isn't nice, but it's not like a high quality, a high quality wood or anything like that. This is just basic pine. So burning it is going to give me a nice look, and most importantly, it's going to mask all the rest of the furniture in the house that I've built. Everything that I build, I burn. So we're going to go ahead and get started burning this thing. If you have a bigger torch, it works faster, but you can do this with pretty much anything. If you had enough patience, you could technically do this with a lighter. So, just a matter of running it along the grain, and it's going to start to darken. Now with this, you don't want it to be like painting. You don't want it to be super consistent, if that makes sense. You want to have some highlights and some lowlights. Another thing that having a bigger torch is nice for, because it helps keep the inconsistency up. Which makes it just look a little bit more natural. So we're going to take some time to get this accomplished, and then I will show you the end result. With the burn-in done, the other thing that I did is with some really light 320 grit sandpaper, I went through and just lightly sanded everything down. What this does is it basically just takes that ash from the darker spots that you've hit and smears it across the board and helps to kind of even out your colors, giving you just a little bit more natural look. Now, before I go any further, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and if you're enjoying the content so far, please like, comment, and subscribe for more. Now, moving on, what we're going to do is we're going to clear coat this thing with some Minwax clear gloss. I prefer to use the water-based stuff. In my experience, it has lasted just as long as the couple things I've done in oil-based, and it just goes on a lot easier. So I'm going to use this for the time being. I'm not doing anything to the legs other than giving them a clear coat. I don't want to paint them or do anything like that. I want to kind of keep the aesthetic that we've got going now. I do have some more welding to do on this. I want to put in some cable management here in the back. I might do something underneath here. It's just going to depend on A, what the boss says, and B, if I've still got material left over to get that done. So I'm going to get a coat of this going. This is going to take several coats to get done, so I want to maximize my time and get this project over with. So we're going to get started on that, and then I'll catch back up with you. And there we go. We have a custom desk all for under $200. So the top itself was $55. All of the trim pieces were $45, and then the steel I was able to get for $100, and I had a little bit left over. So it was a really fun project, and it allowed me to fill my space exactly how I wanted. So if you liked this video and plan on doing it yourself, please like, comment, and subscribe for more projects like this. We're going to have a video coming up on putting the desk together and how the cable management and stuff works, so please stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a wonderful day.